every male in their family except his father.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that all. Yes. We learned today, Lili Nishmat Victor Chayavran Ben Rachaleo Mer Tzvi. And what I want to do is 2 or 3 things today. One is going to be to discuss the middle statement or the second statement in the last Mishne we did, which was in chapter 4, Mishne 18, 19, 20, 21, one of those, which was Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, the second statement is you do not try to comfort somebody when their dead is lying before them. We discussed at length about not trying to calm someone down who's raging, crazy, mad, because it could cause more problems. And today we're going to talk about, step 1 is to talk about this statement about Al tanachamenu bisha'a shemeto mutal lefanav. Don't try to comfort someone when their departed is lying before them. The second thing we're going to talk about is a tangentially related topic of which comes up. I hear this question quite often. Fortunately, I think it's fortunate people ask, but unfortunately, what do you do when someone is dying? Not necessarily active dying, not necessarily in the last days of their lives even, but at some point they get a prognosis that there's no hope. Like he's got 60 days, he's got 90 days, and whatever it might be, or a person's in horrific pain. What do you daven? What do you say? You're allowed to daven for someone to die? Can you? So we're going to come to that. And then for this time, the third topic is going to be the idea of not trying to help someone get out of their vow right after they've made it, which we'll see what that has to do with price tea in China. Okay. So let's get my stuff here. Move this over here, and we're good to go. Okay. So we kind of touched a little bit on this topic last week of when someone the person who has passed away is there. They're either the process of going to the Levaya, or they're at the funeral home, or it's just at the burial itself. And even potentially in the first day or 2 of Shiva, but especially in the beginning, like before the burial. Not only is it not appropriate, again, you could say, I'm sorry. We're not talking about saying, I'm sorry, I feel bad for your loss. That's fine. Trying to comfort the person. Oh, he was such a good person, or she was a wonderful human being, and remember all the good memories. No, don't get into that at that point, because at that point it may even add, not only will not necessarily be comforting, it may actually cause there to be a little bit more sorrow. Trying to distract the person's heart, so to speak, could lead to a disaster. And often people don't necessarily understand that you're in some cases adding to the grief of that individual. Now, it also depends on your closeness to that person. There's a general rule. It's not necessarily halacha, but a general rule that only the first 3 days of Shiva, people are close to the individual should visit. It's a custom. Many people, I don't know if many people, plenty of people either don't know about it or they know, and it doesn't affect them. So again, no one would say, wait a minute, we're not that close. You come back day after tomorrow, dude. No, of course not. But why? Why would that even be considered part of the minhag? It's a similar idea that it's so raw and so fresh. I don't want to hear the nice platitudes from someone who has to make that Shiva call. I want to hear from their friends. I'm a little bit more comforting at that point. Again, it's if there was someone who was sitting Shiva that I wasn't really close to, but I felt I had to make a Shiva call, and I wasn't going to be around. Of course, I go during the first or second day. There are people, unfortunately, who feel that their presence is very comforting, and they will come straight from the funeral, come to the house. No, unless you're family or like the person's best friend, or they've asked you to. No, it's a private time. They have started with what's called the Sudat Havra'ah, the meal that has been prepared for them from outside the home and brought in, at least the eggs and the bread. And the mourners are supposed to eat that meal by themselves before everybody else might want to join them. But they start by themselves. So there's a whole protocol when it comes to this. So it starts actually before the Shiva. It starts actually at the moment of death. As a rabbi, I've obviously been in families who, shortly after the person's passed away, I've been with them. But my job, so to speak, is not to comfort at that point. Of course, I say, I'm sorry, I really feel bad. And it's sincere. But at that point, it's hachvana, giving direction and what to do next and the guidance. And that's true with friends. They should be aware that they're not there to comfort. probably one of the best sources. There are a couple of sources I'll bring about that. One is from Sefer Eov, Book of Job. All the books of Tanakh sound strange when you say them in English. They sound very Christian to me, like the book of Ezekiel and the Amos, not Andy, just Amos, and Hezekiah. No, that's a name. What's that?
Andy couldn't make the cut.
That's right. Andy couldn't make the cut. I'll tell her that. You tell her that. That's right. So what happens is Eov, if you're not familiar with the story, give us like a 1-2 sentence summary at the beginning. Satan makes a deal with God, a bet. Eov has everything. He has riches, he has family, he has goodness in his life, and the Satan says, "I'll bet you I can get Eov to reject you." And God says, "Deal, game on. The only thing you can't do, you can do anything you want to him, except you can't take his life. Anything else you want, you can do." And it ends up his children dying. And by the way, the Midrash says, first of all, whether Eov took place or not at all, ever existed, is the Gemara discusses. It may be just a mashal. May never have been. Let's assume for a moment he did live. There's also a Midrash that says that after his children died and everything else, there was Tchiyat Meitim, and they came back. It was only for a test to see if this would happen. So he takes away everything from him, his money, his children, his wife, everything. And yet he still believes in Hashem. And during the course of majority of the book, I think it's 24 chapters, something like that. It's a lot of discussions between some of his friends and him, and in Job, Eov, of the trying to comfort, trying to rationalize. There are a couple of, I would say, what we'd say today is very stupid statements that are made. And there are some amazingly good statements that are made. And it says as follows in the second chapter of Eov. This is right as his friends start to meet him. They sat on the ground with him. They sat for 7 days and 7 nights with him. They didn't say a word. Because they saw the pain was very great. They realized how painful the grief was of their friend. And they sat there in silence. They didn't open their mouth the whole time. And this is also the source of a halacha, not a minha. Halacha is you go into a mourner's home and you sit down. By the way, among many Sfaradim, especially among, I don't think maybe it's Moroccan. I don't remember which Edah in particular. No, Taimani. You walk in, you say right away, Mina Shamayim to Muhammad. Right away, you give them words of comfort. So it doesn't appear you're coming for a visit. Oh, and also be Menachem Avel. So that's the custom. You should remember to do it because I think it's really nice, but whatever. So when you go in, unless the mourner talks, you don't say anything. Nothing. I mean, you can make a statement like, "I'm sorry for your loss." That's it. And it may be, and I'm sure we've had this experience, all of us at some point, that you sat with somebody who it's quiet and they don't want to talk. And that's fine. Just being there for the person is important as well. There's another source for the idea of not wanting to be able to comfort someone in the moment of the death or the disaster, whatever it might be. And we get it actually from Hashem himself. Yalkut Shimoni, which is a Midrash, tells us in Parshat Shlach that Hashem, at the time of the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, we know, goes into Galut. Also, it says Hashem went into exile, in quotes. And it says that in Yeshayahu, Vayikra Hashem Elokim Tzvakot Bayom Hahu, God of hosts called that day, L'Vechil U'Misped, for weeping and mourning, L'Korcha V'Lachgor Sak, and to put on sackcloth and show mourning. And it tells us that the Midrash adds to that and says the angels went to God and tried to comfort him, as it were. And he said, "Do not rush to comfort me." Now, again, it's metaphorical, it's allegorical, it's all anthropomorphic. But the idea being that even Hashem is telling us when it's at the moment that it's so raw and fresh, don't try to comfort somebody. So so far you've seen the connection or the relationship between someone who's like crazy angry, that you don't try to calm them down because it causes more problems. Someone who's in grief because at that moment they're not rational at that moment. Their minds are on what either needs to be done and the loss and everything else. And that's not the time to talk to somebody. Try, right? I don't like it if I hurt myself. Let's say I trip, God forbid, right? Oh, you okay? Yeah, no, that's good. Just leave me be. No, if I need to be helped up, obviously it's fine. But like, just don't talk. Or if I'm upset about something, oh, calm down. It'll be fine. Yeah, that makes it worse. For me personally, that makes it worse. I don't like to hear that because I know that. Don't tell me to calm down. It'll be fine because I know I will calm down and I'll be fine. Bezrat Hashem. So don't waste your breath on that. Rabbeinu Yonah tells us that the attempt to comfort can sometimes lead to anger or harsh words against Hashem himself even. Avot Rabbi Natan, I'm going to read you a statement that's in the this is the equivalent of Pirke Avot. It's much more expanded. Avot Rabbi Natan, it says as follows. It has to do with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which will momentarily start to lead us into a different discussion. Yeah. It may even have, it's like that. It has probably the same equivalent of a Braita. Yes. Ma'aseh Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Now it's going to sound terrible, but deal with it. Because it comes to an okay conclusion. It does. Ma'aseh Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. There was a story that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now we're not talking about you or me. This is the Rashbi. Okay. He went to visit someone who was sick, or he went to visit sick people. He came across somebody who was sick, who was bloated and lying there with intestinal disease. And the guy lying there sick and in suffering was cursing God. Amarle, so Reb Shimon Bar Yochai said to him, you empty person, you should be davening for rachamim from God instead of cursing him. So God said to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, he said, no, I'm trying to remember who said to whom, just a minute. No, sorry. The sick guy said to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, may Hashem remove my pain and put it on you. Whoa. Now, first of all, before we go further, you start to see like it's a situation where a person is in terrible pain and suffering, similar to possibly a loss, similar to someone who may have been crazed out of anger. And it's not a rational thing to say. And it brings on anger. Here he's trying to Amar Yafeh Asali. So what does Reb Shimon Bar Yochai say? It's himself. Yeah. Amar Yafeh Asali HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a good thing Hashem did me a favor. Sheinachti divrei Torah. I put aside divrei Torah. And I was busy doing idle matters. What is he saying? What's Reb Shimon Bar Yochai saying? Reb Yaakov Emden tells us that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is saying he saw the patient's reaction. He realized he made a massive mistake in his attitude. The patient was in grief. He was withdrawn into himself. He didn't want to hear words from anybody else. His grief was drowning out his reason. Any attempt to comfort him, so to speak, was bound to fail and would provoke and did provoke a very harsh response. What does Shimon Bar Yochai say? That God did me a favor. I left behind Torah and I basically wasted my time here. What does that mean? I wasted my time, or I engaged in idle matters. He said there was no benefit in my speaking logically to this person. You could share your grief, you could share feelings, but don't appeal to this person's intellect and try to say, "Oh, you should do this. You should." No, don't do that. On the contrary, in your attempt to do that, brings a person deeper into grief. So, yes. Oh, let me just bring something up on the screen here. Where is it? What, the temperature? It's a little warm.
I know, because the air conditioning is not working.
Oh, okay. Bummer.
Not venting, but
okay.
You're hot.
Yeah, so I put it on not at all.
Oh, wait, do I have the story here? I have the story here, right? Just a second, let me get myself all set up here. Okay, leave this here for a minute. Definitely. People do lash out when they're ill. The pain Pain affects a lot of things.
Oh, it was only that because I was angry that I said that.
Right. Yeah. And the topic was called the topic was called Sevel, or pain and suffering is itself its own topic. And I'm going to come back to that, but only briefly, because I'll explain why when we get to it. Okay. There's a story in Masechet Ketuvot that's somewhat known, and it informs the basis for a huge area of halacha that is only now in the last few years being really written about, in the last maybe 7 to 10 years. And it has to do with pain and suffering when someone's dying, pain and suffering when they're not dying. And the course I took recently, that took a few months ago, that was Kedushat HaChaim, and dealing with halacha and end-of-life issues, which isn't just end of life, but it's anything within the last year, other topics and medical stuff, all kinds of stuff. And I'm rewriting all my 200 pages of notes into something I could read now. I've written like 30 pages, rewritten 30 regular pages. That's only the first class and a half so far. And this story is the basis for a lot of the literature that is in the process of being written. I'll give you an example of how rare in most post-scheme writing that the topic is dealt with. Rav Ovadia Yosef Zatzal had one tshuva about end-of-life issues. Just one. That was it. Okay, why? Well, maybe that's for a different time, but let me tell you the story. It's from, again, we're going to Ketubot. It deals with a man named Rebbe. Rebbe was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the editor of the Mishne. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was magnificently wealthy, and at the same time didn't let anything go to his head. He didn't take any benefit out of this world, even for his pinky, he said, who was, after Moshe Rabbeinu and until the Rambam, probably one of the greatest scholars that we had, because every day you learn Mishnah and or Gemara, you were learning the Torah of Rabbi. There's also a custom that if you go to the kever of someone who wrote something, you learn something of that person there. So if you go to Beit She'arim, and I've done this, you sit, it's kind of like in a sarcophagus, it's in the mountain, and you sit on top, and you learn Mishnah. It says, he wrote it, right? Imagine Lahavdil, you go to Shakespeare's grave, and you start reading, something from Shakespeare. Yeah, it's just like, it's just cool to know that. Anyways, here's the story. Ahu Yoma de Nachnashi de Rabbi was the day on which Rabbi Yehuda Nasi died. It tells the story what happened. Gazru Rabbanan Ta'anita. The rabbis declared a fast, and they daven to Hashem for mercy. So what are they doing? They're trying to let him live longer. They want to live longer. It's Rebbe. This is the day he was going. He's not yet dead. He is dying. V'amrei, and they said, Kol man damar, whoever says, Nachnashi de Rabbi, whoever says Rabbi Yehuda Nasi has died, Yidakir b'cherev, he's going to be stabbed with the sword, not literally. Meaning, don't even open your mouth. Don't even say the words, has Rabbi died? He died. Don't say the words. Slikai amte de Rabbi ligara. So the maidservant of Rabbi went up to the rooftop. Amra, and she said, El yonim mevakshim et Rabbi. The heavens are requesting the presence of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. V'tachtonim mevakshim et Rabbi. And the people living in this world are requesting the presence of Rabbi. May it be your will, God, that the people down here win. In other words, let Rabbi live. This is the shivcha. This is the maidservant of Rabbi. Okay, but, and this is critical few lines. Kevan, and this, by the way, seriously, has a massive impact in thousands of pages that have been and will be written about the idea of end-of-life issues. Kevan de chazai kama zine de ayel betakise. When she realized and saw how many times while he was there, lying in his bed, he got up to run to the bathroom. The chalatz tefillin, and he took off his tefillin because he wore tefillin all the time. Umanachlahu, and he then put them down and put them back on. The coming star was in such horrific agony. Amra, she said, let the heavenly voice or a calling, meaning to Rebbe, that let the heavens win over the tachtonim, over the ones who were on the earth, meaning let him die. But the rabbis didn't stop davening. And all the time they were davening, Rebbe still was alive. Shakla kuza, she took a glass. Shadya me'igra, she threw it from the rooftop down to the ground. Now, the question is, why was it telling she was on the rooftop? Because it's part of the story. It's foreshadowing. She throws it down and makes a noise. All of a sudden, the people, they stop for a second davening, and Rabbi died. Okay. What's going on here? This, as I say, literally is dozens and dozens and dozens of hours of topic here to discuss. But I want to just talk about one specific area. I just brought originally I took pictures of my notes and put it in my case. That's dumb. Just print my notes. So the question is, there are multiple things that come out of this. I'm not going to get into, just want to note certain things. The topic of sevel, the topic of pain and suffering, how does that impact medical decisions at end of life? I'm not answering this question, just throw them out. How do you relate to somebody who is dying? What do you daven? What do you say? It says, Bo Rachme, they're davening for Rachamim. The rabbis wanted him to live, but at what cost, right? So the whole issue, and again, I'm just bringing it up so you're aware of it, the whole questions that come up, both with medical and halachic, I'll give you one rule of thumb. You're not allowed to do anything that could shorten someone's life, but you have no chiyuv to lengthen someone's suffering. Okay? What is it? Sorry? A DNR sometimes can be, well, correct. DNIs. So I want to just take a pause here for a second and mention one thing. As a result of this class, I am in the process of, there's no official, I'm giving you a tentative date. I want to do an evening at Pnei Shmuel. One's going to be in Hebrew, one's going to be in English. I'm having members, representative of Kedushat HaChaim come, along with a doctor, along with a couple of people from the city and Revacha, to discuss the basics first. What is this organization? How it is there for you 24/7, 365, including Yom Kippur days a year, where phone calls can be made to the center if you have questions of whether it's emergency now I need to know, or question that it doesn't need to be answered today. And to discuss two things that people are very unaware of that I felt should be discussed, not to go into detail, but to discuss, which are two things that are available online with Misrad HaBriut. Number one, a short and long form, they recommend the short form, to write your ratzon. What do you want to have happen if this happens? You're familiar with the concept of the halachic living will. It's a similar idea. That's one. The second thing is called yipui koach mitmashech, or a durable power of attorney, that you assign somebody to be your medical power of attorney. Not your monetary, they can be monetary, but your medical power of attorney, should you not be, was it mens rea? I think it's called in Latin, not in your right mind or you're unconscious, and you want to make sure that your wishes are taken care of. So these two forms are online. I was under the misimpression through, I think, Sohar. I think someone's got something wrong here, but my impression from Sohar was that it's when a person's taken into the hospital or Mata comes to somebody's house, that if you file this with Misrad HaBriut, they can actually see it. At Kedushat HaChaim said it's not true. They can't. So we'll explain, make sure you print it out, have it somewhere available in case, God forbid, there's ever a need for that information. So I want to do, this is like just, I'm mentioning this is a kind of a commercial, that my goal is to do it. There's something like, I think November 9th is the date that I've randomly chosen. A lot of people I have to make sure are on board for that. So that's just to let you know. So reason I'm bringing all this up has to do with this Mishnah, and has to do with the topic of someone who's in pain, someone who's suffering, and someone who's dying. What is it you daven for? I would say, I think it was my first year as a rabbi of the shul. So you're talking 28 years ago. Jeez, that's a long time ago. Someone called me up that their sister/sister-in-law is very sick, dying, and can I die for her to die? Interestingly enough, I used a little what I thought was common sense, and I gave him an answer. I'll tell you what that is in a minute. And that turns out to be the right answer. But there are actually multi-layers. I'll tell you about the answer as I gave shortly. First, let's talk about what are the options? Are you allowed to daven for someone to die? No, I'm talking about, oh, that guy, he cut me off in traffic. I hope he dies. Okay, no. God forbid. Don't put those words out there ever. We're talking about someone who's lying in bed, who has what's called a prognosis that it's a matter of time. It may be a week, maybe 10 days, maybe a month, but and especially if it's like they're on the deathbed and they're suffering. So we'll start with the most well-known, it's well-known again because I finally learned it, even though I remembered it from last years ago, is the Ran. Now in Nadarim, in Masechet Nadarim, Rashi doesn't have commentary. There is what's called the Ran, who is the same Ran who is a posek at the end of the multiple Gemarot. You'll see in the back, he has all kinds of halachot, and there's what's called Drashot HaRan, and all kinds of stuff from there. Anyways, he says like this. The Gemara happens to be talking about someone who's very sick. The Ran says as follows. Nira be'inai, it seems to me, the Hachi Ka'amar, this is what the Gemara meant. I'm not going to go into the Gemara. Pa'amim shetzarich levakesh rachamim ala choleh. Sometimes you have to ask for mercy for the choleh, sheyamut, that he should die. Kigon, for example, shemitzta'er choleh b'cholyo harbe. Ran says you not only can, but should daven for someone to die, the rachamim, because it's an act of rachamim from Hashem, to take him out of his pain and suffering. Someone who's very seriously, not just sick, talking about someone who's mitzta'er, they're suffering. And there's no chance of survival. So there's two, according to the Ran, again, this is not necessarily the accepted opinion. Okay, but I'm telling you where we're starting. There are two criteria. Number one, the person's in tremendous pain. Number two, the prognosis is he's not going to live. And there's no true fault. There's no medication. There's no anything you can do. In that case, the Ran, you are allowed to daven, maybe even said sarich, not allowed, but you should daven for that person to die. That's the Ran. Okay. It's interesting to note, Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal has two main tshuvot, many, but two main tshuvot dealing with end-of-life issues. In the second volume of Choshen Mishpat, in Simanim Ayin Gimel, Ayin Daled, Ayin Hey, it's more than two, I guess, but especially Ayin Gimel, Ayin Hey, where he talks about all these questions. Interestingly enough, Rav Moshe agrees with the Ran and says as follows: "Shetzarich lihitpalel alav shiamut kemo haran." He was responding to somebody's question. You should daven for somebody in that specific situation to pass away, like the Ran. V'hu mosif, and he adds, "Shemedubar she'en mo'alin minei trufot le'refuato." It's not just that there's a prognosis that he's going to die, but it's also there's no medication that could do something to help him in any way. What does that mean? Even give him more morphine. By the way, you have to be very careful with morphine. You're allowed to give literally only the amount the person needs. 1 milligram more, it's considered retzach. It's considered murder. So you have to be, not you, but the medical, it's well known that unfortunately our hospitals, even in Israel, and especially when you're talking about someone who's, let's say in their 90s, the perspective of someone, he had a good life. Here's some more morphine, have a nice life. Okay, catch you on the flip side. That's murder. It's straight out murder. Okay, so let's not get off track. So we see that from Rav Moshe, and he bases himself on the Ran, that there are times when we have to l'shachrer, we have to let the person go and put it in the hands of Hashem. What does that mean? When we daven, it's when we say we're going to daven for someone to pass away, we're not saying we're going to kill him, God forbid. What are we saying? We're saying we put it over in Hashem's hands. We're not going to add any more medication. We're not going to do any more heroic actions. We're not going to do anything. They have all kinds of questions that come up. Let's say a person's dying. Let's say they are what's called choleh hanotel lamut, person who's in the process of dying. By the way, chok in the law of Israel, that's 6 months. In halacha, could be up to a year, because it's not someone who's on their deathbed. There's all kinds of levels. So a person who's choleh hanotel lamut, someone who's dying, and it's something that you wouldn't do certain things for because it's not going to help them. And then they develop an infection that they need antibiotics for. Do you treat the antibiotic? Do you treat the infection? Is it going to maybe make the things worse for the real problem? So there's all these, and I'm not just bringing these topics up. This is the things we discussed in these classes. So there have to be, I would imagine, you would imagine, that that's not the only opinion. Oh, you just daven for the person to die, because it also runs against our grain, right? Like, daven for someone to die? Really? So Interestingly enough, the extreme is the Tzitz Eliezer, who often is extremes in both ways. Sometimes he's extremely makel, very lenient in some things, and some things very strict. And he says here, there's no such thing as davening for someone to die. You don't do that. You have to make every single effort to keep the person alive, and we don't care what his ratzon is. One of the factors when you make a decision as a medical team and as a Rav, you have to take in multiple factors. Is there a prognosis? What is the level of sevel, of pain? And what is the person's ratzon? What is their wishes? It's really important. So he says, doesn't make a difference. He doesn't take ratzon into consideration in this case at all. Okay. So the Aruch HaShulchan lived in the 1800s. He was a Rav in a community. And his method of writing is he starts from the Gemara, he works his way through Bishonim and Achronim, and then he tells you the halachas. He's a brilliant mind. I don't like sometimes, I learned for many, many years, Aruch HaShulchan, my chavruta here. And what a lot of times what Aruch HaShulchan does is he'll talk about a topic, and then halfway through he explains what the topic means. Or like, what is the exact parameters of that issue? I said, why don't you start with that? So I said, I have a lot of things to tell him. I keep notes. Anyways, Aruch HaShulchan says as follows, that you should daven for rachamim, that the cholesh should die berachamim. He also seems to say that that you're really asking for Hashem's mercy to kick in and take this person out of his pain, right? Take him out of his pain. The Yalkut Yosef, and we're going to get to what's the real party line in a minute. I just want to tell you all the different options. Yalkut Yosef, Rabbi Yavanya Yosef said, and again, this is the only tshuva he wrote having to do with the topic of end of life, the only one, which is why Kedushat HaChaim is literally starting from zero, writing the textbooks. There are, like, we have Rabbi Avraham and you have Rabbi Sternbuch and many who've read Sfarim on this, but as far as like, as I say, halacha l'maisa, it's like a Shulchan Aruch for this stuff, doesn't exist yet. So it's being written. Rav Ovadia said that you can daven for someone, in this case, to die. You can daven for a tzemach. It's a terrible way to call it. It's in Hebrew. Tzemach is a plant. In Hebrew, in English, we say someone is a vegetable, right? There's zero hope of recovery. There's zero quality of life. There is nothing. I'm not talking about brainstem damage. That's whatever. I'll get into that. But he said that in that kind of situation, you have the right to say it's an act of rachamim. There's no turning back. There's no getting better. There's no getting up. It could be a nes, but barring a nes, you don't you can't rely on a miracle. So what we do have though is what I told this individual 28 years ago, Rabbi Moshe Sternbuch. You don't daven for the person to die. What do you daven for? How do you phrase it? I want this person's pain to be removed. Why? It can happen one of two ways. The person dies, or they have a miraculous recovery. God can do anything. Even if a sharp sword is on this person's neck, you don't give up rachamim. Is the chance 99.99999% that he will not live? Yes. But is there a point? There's a 1,000,000,000% chance because God can do whatever he wants, right? There are stories, I'm not going to get into them, but there's stories, I'll just share one with you, where this happens. I'll come back to the story in a minute. If I forget to, let me know. Remind me. So Rav Moshe Sternbuch, also Nishmat Avraham. This Avraham is a doctor who wrote a series of Sfarim. By the way, Lord Dr. Jacobovitz Zatzal was the groundbreaking author in ethics, in medical ethics in England. Yeah, who was the chief rabbi of the UK. And I remember when he came out with the book. Well, it was a little bit after he came out with the book. And I was learning for smicha, that became a topic. It was very early on, and I was very proud to say, I'm not getting into today, that my Rabbi, Rabbi Rabinowitz, Rabbi Gedalia Rabinowitz, who I just visited last week, is one of the first poskim to come out with a tshuva, having to define what is a goses, what is a person who's dying, all these different things. So that's pretty cool. Anyways, I don't want to start sidetrack. So the Nishmat Avraham also says the same thing. You don't daven for someone to die. You daven for a person to have rachamim from Hashem and to have their sevel removed. Having their pain and suffering removed, again, can happen in one of two ways. So I'll tell you a true story. I told this story publicly. You for sure know the story because you were there. I remember when I told this. I don't know about y'all, others of you. In 2001, there was a couple, Benny and Batsheva Shoham, were driving back to their home in Psagot. It was right in the beginning of the Second Intifada. And they were driving, and they had their 6-month-old child in the back seat. And a Palestinian, there's no such thing, an Arab Muslim terrorist, Yamach Shemo, threw a rock through the back window and hit him in the head. Didn't kill him right away. He was very baby. The baby was 6 months old, badly injured. He survived, I think it was 2 days. And during those 2 days, remember, there's no WhatsApp yet. Okay, it's all email. There are emails all over the world going around to daven for Yehuda Chaim ben Batsheva. Still remember the name. Yehuda Chaim ben Batsheva, daven. And there's davening all over. Never he died. A few months later, Benny and Batsheva, the parents, went to the United States. They felt that, not for money, they felt that people just don't know how bad it was in Israel at the time. And they felt that it was their duty to go from community to community and talk. And they came to my show. And they came into my office before they started, and they said, I want to tell you a story on the condition you tell the story. So I've told the story many times because I made a promise to tell the story. And that's as follows. While they were sitting Shiva, they got a call from a couple in Baltimore. Because I'd never heard of Baltimore before. Got a call from Baltimore. It says, you don't know us. We're calling to be Menachem Avot. So I want to tell you an unbelievable story. The day your son was hit in the head, the rock, is the same day our 6-month-old baby was told he has no chance. The only thing we could do is to die. The doctor, he was sick with whatever it was. Absolutely no chance. Ain't going to happen. Just pray for mercy. The day your son died, the doctors came in and said, we have absolutely no idea what happened. He's going to be okay. We can't explain it. His name was Yehuda Chaim ben Batsheva. Our tefillot don't come back empty. They don't help us necessarily, but they're out there, which is why the power of your words is so important, which ties right into this whole topic today. When we daven for somebody, for refuah shlema, when we daven for someone to have their sevel removed, there's power to those words. It's not just these rok milim. It's not just throwing words out to God. Hey, God, make that guy better, right? So you have to be careful with your words. And I think I'll stop here. The topic of the Nedarim, I'll wait for next week. Bezrat Hashem. And wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. All right. Like I say, there's a ton of stuff to talk about in this topic, obviously, but not for now.
Look,